Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for joining me this evening on the late one. Um, Thank you for this Sunday evening. It's a beautiful Sunday evening. Today is the 24th of April 2022. And it's we're getting there for the year. But I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. And this evening, we have a very interesting show. And this show, we're talking about Jamaica, of course, on Jamaica Diaspora Affairs, Republic, and Politics. I try to somehow bring different shows that will bring different dimension, and of course, my land of my birth. But I like this program tonight. This program, for me, it's dear to my heart because in 2004, if one can remember, that was the initial diaspora conference. I think it's 2004, 2006. Well, Delano will confirm that. And and during the course of that time, there's so many things that we spoke about. We have the initiation of the Diaspora Initiative. Many different things came out of that. But also moving on now, we're talking about the Commonwealth. We're talking about removing the Queen as the head of state. And my guest tonight, which is Delano Franklyn, who is practicing attorney at law, a businessman, founding partner of the law firm Wilson and Franklin, which was established in 1998. Delano was also the Minister of State in the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs with responsibility for the diaspora. And he wrote two articles of recent days. I know we had some little difficulty earlier, but I believe everything is sorted now. And I'm going to bring him in just so we can actually test the whole process. Yes. And here we go. Delano.
Hi, Cyril. How are you? It's a pleasure to be on your program.
Well, I think the most important thing for me was to make sure that I can hear you clearly. And that's the most important thing.
Yes, and I am also hearing you loud and clear, and I hope your listeners and viewers are also able to hear me from rainy Jamaica. It has been raining here, cats and dogs, for the last 2, 3 days.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Well, what can I say? It's always nice when you're in Jamaica and the rain is falling, and the nice sound on top of the rooftop. Even though at the same time I've been hearing that some serious rain has been falling in Jamaica, which has created the loss of lives at the same time. So I don't want to belittle the fact that the rain can be a bit uh,
It's,
dangerous.
indeed, it's very unfortunate for
Mm,
persons who are living in low-lying areas, and we have traditionally experienced great challenges and difficulties when
yes,
heavy rainfall would lead to flooding
yes.
and regrettably, in some instances, loss of lives. Absolutely devastating when that happens. But there's
Mm,
a cold front now moving over the country. It is predicted by the meteorological center that it will be hovering over Jamaica for
yes,
a few days yet. So
yes,
we have been experiencing quite unusually heavy rainfall across parishes. And as I speak to you now from Kingston, we're
yes.
having heavy rains, and I just came in from the good parish of St. Mary,
Mm.
via via parish of St. Anne.
Straight out of Ochi. So
And
you pass through Ochi.
yes, man, I went through the rails and then took the bypass and came into Kingston. And
Yes.
there's also heavy rainfall that side. So I'm hoping that at the end of the rains, when we are back to sunshine,
Yes.
that we would not have suffered any loss of life.
Yes, that's great. Well, Delano, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming. And ladies and gentlemen, those on Instagram, the show is going live on YouTube and also Facebook, SYLBOURNE TV, primarily YouTube. I'd like you to share it as well. I want this to be empowering and educational program. Delano, I don't know where to first start on. I think the best thing I start on with is 2004.
That's
um,
not a problem.
two,
That's only 18 years ago.
2004, I believe, was the first diaspora conference, wasn't it? If I'm
Yes,
not mistaken.
it was the first major diaspora conference that we have had.
even though at the same time there are some preliminary um, meetings beforehand with key stakeholders. But ladies
They,
and gentlemen, sorry, Delano, go on. Yeah.
no, you're right. There were preliminary meetings because I assumed the responsibility of Minister of State and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in 2002. And
Yes.
I was tasked with the responsibility of having oversight for Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica. And therefore, we
Yes.
had to find ways and means to drive what that organizational structure would be like.
Mm-hmm.
It led to us having preliminary discussions with quite a number of stakeholders, both in the diaspora community, primarily the United States of America, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And
Yes.
out of all of that discussion, it was unanimously agreed that we should aim to have a national conference which would have Jamaicans living in Jamaica engage with Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica. And that
Yes.
first diaspora conference took place June 16th, 2004.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And consecutive 2016, 2006, and 2008, and 2010. And I believe that one of them, I think it was either 2008 or 2010, when the Doodles thing happened, that did not take place. But a few of us, with myself, went to Ocherius and we had a de facto one, which I made sure we said we weren't going to allow that to stop the conference. But yeah.
Yeah. What happened is that the conference in 2004 took a number of decisions.
Yes.
And one of the decisions it took was to have that kind of conference every 2 years.
Yes.
And as correctly pointed out, it ran every 2 years up to 2008.
Yes.
And then we had what you referred to as the Dudos debacle, 2009 going into 2010. And in
Yes.
2010, a conference was supposed to have been convened in 2010. But because of the position taken by the government, then, for one reason or another, the conference preparation had not been undertaken. But there were
Mm-hmm.
many persons who figured that it was important for something to be had. They figured that it would not have been correct for the conference to be abandoned. And at the last minute, a gathering took place in Ocherius. I
Yes.
think about 60 to 70 persons.
Yeah, I
Um,
was one of them. I was one of them as well that came
right,
down
got
specifically.
together,
Yes.
got together in Ocherius, where some amount of deliberation took place. And then the conference, as we all come to know it, got back on stream some years thereafter. But yet, yes, it was in 2004, and we are now in 2022. So the first major conference, as a result of the deliberations between Jamaicans outside and Jamaicans inside, would have
Mm-hmm.
taken place 18 years ago.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I, because there's so much things that we could talk about, but one thing that I want to bring up here, and it is about the overseas voting. Yes,
Yes,
and I recall that I brought it on the floor either 2004 and I think 2006, and I do recall you called me saying, "Where's SYLBOURNE?" Because Danville Walker was the director of elections, I believe, was
yes, he was
there.
director. He was director of elections at the time, and he was in attendance.
Yes. Yes. And I was in the bathroom upstairs, and he said, "Where's SYLBOURNE?" And to this day, Delano, one of the things that a lot of us are saying is that from that time, consecutive conferences kept talking about the overseas voting, and somehow there's not a resolution in that as well from that time. And each time it is brought up, it is like something fresh, as if it has not been heard of before. And the point I make is that not that I have a view like it should be yes or no, but it's like there's a need for a resolution in that particular thing. I don't know what's your take on that now. Are
The
you having
issue of
some challenge?
whether
Sorry,
no,
yeah.
the issue of whether or not Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica should vote in our national elections has been an issue of for discussion for many, many years now. It preceded the conference in 2004. It took on greater flavor during that conference and subsequently. And it all has to do with the larger picture of how the how should we structure an organizational relationship with Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica for them to be able to participate in the national affairs of Jamaica. And the issue of voting is one such issue. I think we're split down the middle. There are those who support it and there are those who do not support it. And for good reasons on both sides. That conference where we had Mr. Danville Walker, Director of Elections at the time, he was specifically invited because it was felt that it was necessary for us to put on the conference agenda the issue of voting by members of the diaspora for it to be discussed. And you will recall that we had a very, very vibrant discussion. The reason why I asked for you specifically was simply because you were one of those who wanted that matter to be discussed. In fact, you were one of those out of the United Kingdom who said that we ought to have it listed as an agenda item.
Yes.
So when we came to that time on the agenda and I looked around, I realized that there were some critical persons to that discussion missing from the conference floor. And you were one of them. So we asked for all to be gathered. Mr. Danville Walker gave his presentation and he put on the table the pros and cons of having people outside of Jamaica voting. We had a very frank and open discussion thereafter. And no decision was taken at all at the end because we were split down the middle. And I will share with you some of the issues which have come up and which still continue to be source of either contentment or discontentment today. Firstly, Jamaicans who are registered in Jamaica and who are living abroad can come home to vote when there is an election. So Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica who are on the electoral list in Jamaica do have a right to vote and participate in national elections in Jamaica because you can't vote if you are not a registered voter. So there are many Jamaicans that I know who live in the US, in the UK, Canada, in the Caribbean, who are on the voters list, who make sure that they are on the list because, as you know, the list is updated on an annual basis and updated quite regularly, I think every 6 months, during the period of one election to the other, which is usually every 5 years, although a prime minister can call an election before the expiry of the 5 years, and even after if there is a special reason why that ought to be so. But I know of many Jamaicans, particularly Jamaicans living in Florida, very close to Jamaica, who are on the voters list, who come home to make sure that they're on the voters list, who get their voters card. One of the things that they do when they come here is to get their voters card, and they do come and vote and they participate in the process. Secondly, there are many Jamaicans outside of Jamaica who might not be on the voters list, but they are active participants in elections. When an election is called in Jamaica, they campaign very heavily. Where they are, they donate financially. They send things to the respective political parties to aid and to assist their campaign, and they watch very closely the campaign and things are developing, and they express their support for one party or the other. Jamaicans will always say to you, I don't want to discuss politics, but tell me so and so, and then they go on to discuss politics because Jamaicans are very passionate persons about party political involvement.
Yes.
No. So they do participate. Now the question is whether or not a Jamaican living outside of Jamaica can be a policy put in place for that person to vote.
Yes.
My position has always been that I do not believe that it is correct at this juncture for a Jamaican who is living outside of Jamaica, not on our voters list, to vote in our national election. And why do I say so? At the moment, we have in Jamaica a population of about 3 million persons. On the voters list, we have near 2 million. I think it's about 1.8 million persons who are on our voters list as I speak. The Jamaican population outside of Jamaica runs you anywhere near that 3 million also. And if you were to break it down, the persons who are of the age to vote, you might also get a 1.8 million potential voters living outside of Jamaica. When we have an election, we barely get 1 million Jamaicans voting. In fact, in the last election, it's the lowest turnout.
Yeah.
Yes, the last election which we had in 2020, only 37%.
Wow.
Of that 1.8 of which I spoke about earlier came out to vote. No, if you were to have
how much are we talking about in people? How much? What's the figure? Is that?
You would be talking about 38%. You're talking about roughly, if I remember the numbers correctly, you're talking about 600,000 persons.
Wow, 600,000.
Right?
Wow, yeah.
600,000 persons would run you 1/3 of those on your voters list. Right? So if you have 1.8 nearing up to 1.9 and you have only 37% actually coming out to vote, what that means is 67% of your voting population is staying home. Now let us look at it very practically. If you have a situation where 33% of your voting population living in Jamaica voting in an election, and you have another 1.8 million potential voters outside of Jamaica, and 60% of them turned out to vote, it means that you would have in Jamaica roughly 600,000 people voting, but outside of Jamaica you'll have probably about 1 million voting.
But can I come in right there? Yeah. Can I come in right there, Delano? But the persons overseas who are voting, would they be assigned to constituencies in Jamaica? Wouldn't they be?
Which raises the other issue. So the first issue is when you have a situation where the majority of your voters who are voting are persons who live outside of Jamaica and have to deal with Jamaica on a day-to-day basis. That's the first issue. Yeah. How do you deal with a situation where the majority of the persons expressing support for a political party in Jamaica lives outside of the country? That's the first issue. Yeah. The second issue is what you raised earlier. How would you register those votes? Is it that, and I'm going to use you as an example. SYLBOURNE Sidel, to the best of my knowledge, was born in St. Anne. SYLBOURNE Sidel, when
he was born in St. Mary, and people still question my right to be called an Ochiman. He was born in St. Mary.
Born on the border. That raises another issue. Where exactly were you born?
Port Mary Hospital.
Right. Now, if you were born in Port Mary, it simply means that you were born in St. Mary.
Yes.
So,
but I'm still an Ochiman.
No, you're an Ochiman, but it means that you would be voting where you would have been registered to vote.
Yes.
So although you were born in Port Mary Hospital, you have been residing, and I'm just saying this now. Say you have been residing in Ochias all your years.
Yes.
And say when you were in Jamaica, if you were to vote, it simply means that you would vote in the Ochias division.
Yes.
Isn't it that when Sidel leaves Jamaica and go to live in Britain, and I've been living in Britain for all these years, when Sidel is to vote, Sidel would vote in the constituency in which Ochias is located?
Yes.
That is an issue. It's a live issue. How is it that you're going to be able to determine where a Sidel would vote in Jamaica? How is it you determine where Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica, where would they vote?
Well, CDL has two
The third,
passports.
pardon me?
CDL has two passports at the same time.
But even if you have two passports, remember that you can't vote in Jamaica unless you're a Jamaican citizen. So you would have to be a citizen of Jamaica in order to participate in our electoral affairs.
But isn't
So the
this a
fact
dual
that
citizenship? This is a dual
the
citizenship.
fact that you have, the fact that you have,
Yeah.
the fact that you have two passports simply means that you are a dual citizen,
Yes.
and dual citizens are recognized.
Yes.
So the issue is where would you register that vote, and how would the electoral office of Jamaica be able to capture that vote? The third issue, Sidiel, is where physically would you vote? Is it that you leave from where you are and go to the consulate and vote? Is it that you leave from where you are and go to somewhere else in order to vote?
Okay. Now
The fourth issue is even if we were to determine where exactly you would vote, how would that voting process be monitored?
Okay.
In Jamaica, it is monitored. In Jamaica, it is monitored very simply by the Electoral Office of Jamaica, agreeing with the two political parties as to where voting centers ought to be.
Yes.
On the day of an election, the Electoral Office of Jamaica would have conduct of the elections, and therefore their people would be in place. And the political parties also have their persons present to ensure that from their perspective, they are not disadvantaged.
Delano, I want to land on this issue because we got a couple more. But one point I want to say right there is that my colleagues that I work with in the legal fraternity here in the UK, some of them are from South Africa, some of them are from Australia, and I do recall at times they go to their respective High Commission to vote when they got elections in Australia, in South Africa, and also in the USA, right? Now, one point I want to say is that if you, Delano, now passing through the UK and you say you're coming up for 2 weeks to do a book sale and stuff like that, because I got your book here, which is Jamaica Diaspora, you're on a 2 weeks thing, and then Andrew Holness said, "Let's call an election." Yeah. I wouldn't want you, Delano, to dash back to Jamaica, even though I know you would do that more than likely to vote. Wouldn't it be great if you could vote at the High Commission?
I'll put it this way. If there are persons who are on the electoral lists and find themselves outside of Jamaica, as it stands now, you have to be physically present in Jamaica to vote. The question you're raising is whether or not we can work towards putting in place a policy which has to be backed by workable mechanism to have Jamaicans who live in Jamaica being able to vote from where they are outside of Jamaica. And that it's a live issue. I raise these issues, Sidiel, in order to be able to outline some of the matters which will have to be discussed, which will have to be agreed upon, and which will have to be implemented.
Yes.
Because it is if the budget of the Electoral Office of Jamaica now for a national election runs you about $1 billion Jamaican dollars, if not more, and you can do the math. I think it's about 205 Jamaican dollars now to £1. So if you are going to include people outside of the jurisdiction coming from the Jamaican diaspora community, with Jamaicans literally living everywhere, the budget that you're talking about. Another big issue before we leave this topic. Issue before we leave this topic that came at that conference. Have come up at different conferences in terms of Jamaicans being able to vote in elections. Jamaicans who are living outside is the issue of payment of taxes.
Yes.
Jamaicans who are here are required to pay the requisite tax, depending on what they do in Jamaica.
Yes.
You're also required. You're required to pay your NHT, your education tax, your national insurance tax. You're required to pay your property tax. You're required to pay numerous taxes, all of which ought to go back to a central fund, unless it is dedicated tax. Central fund to ensure that the country has basic facilities, education, health, proper road network, proper interlink network, and so on. How do you treat with persons living outside of Jamaica who don't pay any taxes? Don't
Mm.
get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. There are
Yes.
hundreds of Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica who contribute consistently to Jamaica's financial development. There are many who contribute to their schools. There are many who contribute to their communities. There are many
Mm.
who contribute to hospitals. There are many who contribute to education facilities. Jamaicans outside of Jamaica contribute in a very significant way.
Yes.
The matter of on a constant basis, they do. But Jamaicans who live in Jamaica are required by law to pay certain tax, and that
Mm.
you have to pay, that you face consequences. Now, there are many who argue that if I am required to pay my taxes, then I ought to be given the right to also vote.
Yes.
Whether or not you are constitutionally due to vote by way of age, the fact that I'm a Jamaican living in Jamaica and
Mm.
I'm being taxed constantly, that in and by itself ought to give me the opportunity to vote.
You see?
Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica,
Yes.
unless they have assets here in Jamaica, unless continue to maintain certain residency here in Jamaica, are not required to pay any taxes in Jamaica. So the issue
Can I
becomes,
just
why then
yeah,
should they be given the right to vote?
yeah. Can I just bring this one? Because someone just said a while ago, you might not be able to see some comments which are coming up. The
No, I'm
tax
not able
issue,
to say.
yeah, the tax issue is a non-issue, as according to someone. There are people
Sure.
resident in Jamaica who do not pay taxes, and the person goes further; they are not excluded from voting.
Well,
Uh,
let me say this.
mm,
Let me say, I don't agree with that person who say it is not an issue. It is an
yeah,
issue. I
yeah,
agree that there are persons in Jamaica who I don't. Well, let me put it this way. I have no evidence of persons who don't pay taxes. If there are persons who don't pay, so be it. But I have no evidence of that. The point that I'm trying to make, though, the point I'm trying to make is that once you're on the electoral list in Jamaica, you have a right to vote. This is different. This is
yes,
different from persons, the vast majority of Jamaicans, I believe, pay their taxes and pay their
yes,
taxes on time. You might have a few who don't pay. I don't have any evidence. I've heard of
yes,
it. But the
mm,
issue is those who don't pay their taxes and are on the electoral roll but live in Jamaica, does that give the person who is living outside of Jamaica, who is not paying any taxes, the right to vote?
credibility. You give them some credibility. Well, Delano, listen, I want to thank you for this one, but it is clear, though, Delano, that this is an issue that just needs to be resolved, at least where the government can say, we have dealt with it, we have addressed it, and this is a position. You agree on that, though, isn't it? It is still
No, man,
outstanding.
I'm in total agreement with that. I can't recall this particular issue ever being elevated to the point of there being a parliamentary discussion and a
Yes,
decision being taken on it. I do know that from time to time, parliamentarians, whether in the lower house or the upper house, would express a view
yes,
as to whether or not it happened or not. But I believe that one day it
yes,
will be it will lead to a formal debate and formal discussion
yes.
in our and upper houses for a
Mhm.
decision to be taken one way or another.
Well, thank you so much for that bit, and I'll let not you, but let the person on someone to make their final point by saying the point is being missed. Voting in Jamaica is not linked to payment of taxes, but we can take that up another time, Delano. Delano, you wrote an article of recent days. Um, I coined it, should Jamaica rid itself of the British monarchy? And this was on the backdrop of recent days of Prince William and Kate visiting Jamaica, and you set out the position in your article that it is time to get rid of the British monarchy. You can correct me if that is correct, but it is high time now, isn't it, that Jamaica deal with this issue? What's your take on it as well? Even though I know, but I just wanted you to expand for the purpose of the viewers, sir. Yeah.
This is another issue that has been in the public domain for many years. Uh, Ever since we got independence in 1962 to date, there are persons who have agitated for Jamaica to become a country that is independent of having the Queen as our head of state. I am one
Yeah.
of those who support that position. I believe that there is absolutely no role or room for a head of state outside of Jamaica to participate in our public affairs. And therefore, we must do everything that is humanly possible to try and ensure that we move from the kind of constitutional monarchical system which we
Yeah.
currently have. And if we are to have a head of state, it should be a Jamaican who is that head of state. What are the issues, or what is the primary issue? The Jamaican constitution is very clear as to the parliamentary procedure and the national procedure which we ought to pursue in order to be able to detach ourselves from the British monarchy with the Queen as our head of state. In the first instance, you need a two-thirds majority in the lower house, and you also need a two-thirds majority in the upper house. A political party with majority holdings in the lower house that is of the view that we ought to remove the Queen can get that two-thirds majority in the lower house. In the upper house, however, where we have 21 senators, 8 on one side and 30 on the other side, it is going to be very difficult to get that two-thirds majority unless the two political parties are in full and total agreement, and therefore they are prepared to vote not along party lines, but
Yeah.
along a line, but along of unison, which would say we are not in agreement with the Queen continuing as our head of state, and therefore we are going to vote for her removal. Having done that in the lower house and having done that in the upper house, the Constitution stipulates very clearly that the matter ought to be put to a referendum in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And in that referendum, we ought to garner minimum two-thirds majority support. Now, two-thirds majority support, you can cut it any way you wish. You're talking about 66 plus as majority. If we have only 37 or 33% of our people coming out to vote in a national election,
Yeah.
just imagine the task of getting two-thirds of our people to come out and vote in a referendum.
Can I just
And
clarify
that,
one point? Can I clarify
yes,
one point for the purpose of myself also? That 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 two-thirds should be a portion of the full electoral voters list.
yes, you would use in a referendum, you would use your
Yeah.
voters list.
The voters list.
Because in a referendum, the voter list consists of persons who are
Yeah.
18 years and more.
Wow.
And the voters list is what would be used as your guide to determine those who would be able to participate in your referendum. So you would be required, in
Mm.
order to take that decision, two-thirds of your people who are on the voters list voting to rid itself of the Queen as our
Wow.
head of state. The only way that can happen is when every stakeholder is singing from the very same hymn sheet.
Mm.
So the political parties will have to be in agreement on this issue. Our church be in agreement on this issue. The media will have to be in agreement on this issue. the trade unions will have to be in agreement on this issue in order for us to be able to approach the country with a unified position to be able
Yes.
to generate, by way of a referendum, two-thirds majority support. So while in principle, we, while in principle, there are many of us who are in agreement that we need to cut that navel string. That navel
Yes.
string, we need to cut it in order to be able to hold up to the world that we are a country with people who will be able to govern ourselves without being able to take any form of instruction from outside. Do you know
Mm.
when I was in the Senate, as senator and a
Mm.
minister, how heart-rendering it was for me and many of my colleagues to swear allegiance to the Queen. I've never met the lady, no doubt she's a very nice person.
Mm.
She's a very nice person, and I give her all the accolades required. I give her all the graciousness that is required. But I'm the lady. Why then would I, who entered Parliament on behalf of the people of Jamaica, swear allegiance to a
Mm.
non-Jamaican? And what makes it even worse for someone like myself, Sidel, and for those persons who support ridding ourselves of the head of state being out of Jamaica, is to know what our foreparents went through by
Mm.
our colonial masters to be where we are now. The British monarch and the British crown was financed by way of countries such as Jamaica,
Yeah.
a country that was the leading exporter of sugar, sugar produced by our foreparents who were chattel slaves. So
But
for
Delano,
us,
uh, sorry, keep going. Finish your point, and I'll come in and say something. Yeah.
no, no, so I say for us, I say for many of us who are here, it has to do with how we view ourselves. Do we have the capacity or do we not have the capacity? And
Mm.
I'll just raise one other issue before you come in, because there are persons who will say,
Yes.
how come Jamaica is taking so long to do this thing if they really mean it?
Yes.
And
Lots of people are
Barbados,
saying that.
and,
Yes. Lots of
and
people.
Barbados,
Yes.
Barbados, by way of the government now in office there and its Prime Minister, Mia Mottley,
Mm.
Barbados was able to sever relations with the Queen as head of state and become a republic in such a short period of time. Barbados was able to do it because constitutionally, the road to sever relations with the head of state is far easier than Jamaica. In Barbados, you can do it by way of a two-thirds majority of your houses of parliament, which is what they did.
Yeah.
There's no
You see,
need for a
yeah.
referendum in
Yeah.
Barbados.
Yeah. You see, Delano, just picking up a couple comments, and one marries with what I was going to say as well. What I
Yes, sir.
understand is that the PNP is somewhat in sync with this, because Mark Golan is an advocate for that. The JLP, according to what they said to to Prince William, well, we're moving on, can be taken in different ways, according to your article as well, is in
Right.
sync. And even UIC is also a cheerleader. And what the person said, is this not now an issue? Is this not now an issue on which both parties agree? The issue is going to be getting the people, that two-third. Isn't that going to
Right.
be the real issue, Yolanda? Minister.
Well, let me take it in two parts. And I accept that point that is being made by one of your viewers or listeners.
Mm.
There are times, well, let me put it this way. The People's National Party has consistently put on the table
Mm.
Michael Manley, PJ Patterson, Portia
Yes.
Simpson Miller, who were all prime ministers, and now Mark Golding, who is the leader of the party. The principled position of the party has always been, and it has not changed. Other things may change, but it has not changed. That
Mm.
Jamaica ought to move from being in a position where our head of state is the Queen to becoming a republic. There are times over the years when the Jamaica Labour Party have expressed agreement with that position. I remember the late Prime Minister, he was then leader of the opposition, Mr. Edward Philip George Seaga,
Yes.
saying that he was in agreement. And then at the last minute, there was a disagreement as to whether or not the head of state in Jamaica ought to have ceremonial or executive power.
Yes.
And when that became an issue, he backed away from the table and we were back to square one. That's history. Let us now come to 2022.
Yes.
The People's National Party, through its leader, Mark Golding, has expressed the position very clearly that the party supports having a local head of state. And
Yes.
therefore, everything ought to be done to have the Queen removed as our head of state. The Prime Minister, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, for the first time in commenting, said that we are moving on. I really don't know what that means. I have no idea what moving on means. I don't know if moving on means that we are moving on from the meeting which he was having with the royal family. I don't know if moving on um, means that his party is prepared to look at this matter. I don't know if moving on means that his party is prepared to move towards the support of republicanism. I really don't know what it means. I
And
am
Delano,
not going to.
you're not being facetious at the same time, because everybody
No,
is
I'm
of
not.
the view what he meant is, yeah.
No, no.
Everybody's of the, yeah. So go on. Sorry, yeah.
I believe
No, I
it is
said,
important for the Prime Minister to clarify and to state without
mm,
any form of reservation exactly what he means. One of the reasons why I am not in a position to be able to determine what moving on means is that moving on would mean that you would now need to sit at first with the opposition so that the minds can be at one as it relates to this matter.
yeah.
Moving on also means if it is if it means severing relations with the Queen, meeting as quickly as possible over a shorter period as is possible with stakeholders in Jamaica to signal what is your position and what is your intention. Because as I said, whether it is the PNP that is in power or the Jamaica Labour Party is in power as it is now, none of the parties can proceed on their own to be able to make a determination that we're going to relations. We must be able to get all of our persons, all of our people on board. And to do that, we have to, without reservation, signal to them, one, what we're about, and two, that we would wish for no division in the ranks.
Yes. Well, it seems, Delano, that there need to be a clarification on the moving on, and also a process to bring the people with to say what is going to happen. Because my next topic, which I want to bring to you on, is regarding the Commonwealth and Jamaica pushing to have someone leading the Commonwealth Secretariat. So at the same time, you're moving on. Well, most people believe what he said was moving on from the Queen being the head of state. Of course, you're right. You need clarification as to that. Someone just
That
said a while ago, yeah, someone just said a while ago, the JLP wants to replace the Queen, but the parties don't agree on the type of presidency that we must have, because there's a view. Many people say that the one that Motley has in Barbados, some say it's a fake republic, mean to say it has no fundamental substance because the constitution hasn't changed really. It's just a ceremonial thing still.
well, let me put it this way:
Yeah.
the CARICOM countries that have moved from this kind of British monarchical constitutional construct that we have to a republic have been the People's Republic of Guyana, the
Yes.
People's Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and now Barbados. In all three, in all three, in the instance of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, we have ceremonial president. In Guyana, we have an executive president.
Yes.
If Jamaica is to go either way, then it would mean going through the process which I outlined earlier, but also making a decision as to whether or not the head of state would be a ceremonial head of state or an presidential type. That is for discussion and to be determined. If it is, it will be far easier. And I'm not agitating for this. I'm just telling you, trying to outline procedurally which one is
Yes.
easier. If it is to be a ceremonial president, as in the case of Barbados, that will be far easier, because then what you would do is make the constitutional change, and you'll have a person in the form of our Governor General now, who would
Yes.
not have taken instructions or report to the Queen, but would operate in his or her stead.
Yes.
If it is to be a presidential type of government that would have here with an executive presidency, then of course we will have to make certain constitutional changes, because it would make for a determination as to how the executive president would carry out his or her power vis-a-vis the prime minister, who has
Yes.
prime ministerial power in countries such as Jamaica.
Yeah. So can we confidently say that nothing has started yet, or can we say something has started because of the appointment of this lady? Um, you're not seeing her, Malahu Fort, being appointed to a key position there, that ministry, to start the process. That's the view that we're getting, that they're
But let me
starting the process of this.
let me say this to you.
Yes.
Um, Minister Malahu Fort has been appointed to a newly created ministry,
Mm,
um, constitutional reform and legal reform. I think that's the name of it. It's not the exact name. That's the essence of it.
mm,
There is no pronouncement from the prime minister that that ministry or that minister have been given the responsibility to look at reform of the constitution within the context of towards a republic.
yes.
Neither prime minister has said it, nor the minister has said it. In fact, I tell you this: there are many of us in Jamaica, even those of us who are in the legal profession, who have absolutely no idea what that minister represents,
Yes.
and
Yes.
therefore it is for um, the minister and the prime minister, where he sees fit, to clarify exactly what is the role and responsibility of that ministry. But certainly nothing has been said by either that that
Mm,
ministry is charged with the responsibility of looking at our laws, looking at our constitution, with a
yes.
view of making recommendations as to what we ought to do or not do, because we are now on the road to move from the kind of construct which we have to a republican system.
Yes. Well, thanks for that. There are more comments there, and of course, Delano, I'll encourage you to visit the YouTube channel after, so you can see some of the comments there, and we can keep tapping onto that. One more last thing of my three key strands was Jamaica CARICOM and Commonwealth Secretary General. Of
Yes,
recent days, we have seen where the Prime Minister has put forward the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Her picture is up there, Kamina Johnson, to run for the seat as the Commonwealth Secretary General, competing against Barney Scotland. And ladies and gentlemen, apparently there was an agreement for Jamaica to support Barney Scotland, according to the CARICOM Secretariat and their network, but somehow this was breached. It reminds me, Delano, of Chief Curry, where Chief Curry said him and the guys them were supposed to
yes,
be all in sync, and then some
yes.
of them went to the Prime Minister and have their own meeting, them undermining. What's your take on this? Because I must say, before you go any further, I was thinking that if the Prime Minister is saying we're moving on, and I took it as moving away from the Queen, and I'm saying, hang on a second, the Commonwealth Secretariat, even though I know persons who are not part of, or who are republics, still a part of the Commonwealth, it seems like you're getting entangled. This is not like Jade or Will, but it's like you're getting entangled again in the bastions, the relics of the past, the bit of the Commonwealth, which I believe somehow give credence to saying OBE, MBE still. And I'm saying, why? Isn't that a retrograde step? Even though I believe at the same time, as you said, that she can perform very effectively, as Jamaicans always do. But what's your take on that, Sir Franklin?
I am not for one moment questioning the competence
Mm,
of Minister Nina Smith. I'm absolutely sure that if she's elected to become the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, that she will do her utmost best to represent Jamaica to the best of her ability.
mm,
There are persons who question whether she has the requisite skills, the requisite knowledge, the requisite um, understanding to be able to operate at that level. Whether she does or she doesn't, I believe that if she's elected, that she will um, do everything to carry the flag of Jamaica very high. In relation to Baroness Scotland, try and recall that when she was elected to become the Secretary General, CARICOM was also split on the matter. Baroness Scotland was born in Dominica,
yeah.
but she has spent all of her years in the United Kingdom, and therefore some people saw her as not really and truly representative of the Caribbean, because they say, unlike others who would visit the Caribbean from time to time, unlike others who would support the Caribbean, speak highly of the Caribbean outside of the CARICOM, that she was not a person who did that. Nevertheless, and as a consequence, another candidate at the time was put up, a candidate by the name of Saunders, if my memory serves me right. During the process of the campaign, however, even before the campaign started, I think Saunders withdrew, and therefore Baroness Scotland became the only candidate. And she was elected, and over time she gained the support of the vast majority of the CARICOM countries. Remember that the Commonwealth election of Secretary General takes place ever so often in a
Yes.
round robin kind of fashion, which means that the different regions have turns to determine when a Secretary General should come from their region. And the precedent is that the Secretary General from a region would serve for 2 terms. Baroness Scotland is now going into her second term.
Mm,
So it was felt that CARICOM ought to support Baroness Scotland because it is the second term for CARICOM. An intersessional meeting of CARICOM leaders was held in Belize, and based on the information out of it, they agreed unanimously that they would once again they would support the reappointment of Baroness Scotland to this. 1 month thereafter, without, as it has turned out, any form of consultation with CARICOM colleagues, any form of discussion with CARICOM colleagues, any information that Jamaica has changed its mind, changed its position, coming out of that intersessional where they agreed to Baroness Scotland in Belize, the Jamaican government decided to put forward its current Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Now, this has caused a lot of stink in the Caribbean, to the extent where the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda wrote a letter which was circulated to all CARICOM members and others that and described the appointment or the selection by the Jamaican government of Minister Kamina Smith as a monumental failure. It simply means that CARICOM is extremely divided now on the matter. I don't know what caused the change by the Jamaican government to move from a position of supporting Baroness Scotland to saying that it now supports or is prepared to put forward Minister Kamina Smith. I don't know why the Jamaican government never engaged its CARICOM colleagues, having changed its mind on this particular matter. I am of the view, however, that something happened between that meeting in Belize when they supported Baroness Scotland and when they decided to change their mind to put forward Minister Kamina Johnson Smith. And I believe, and I will say, based on what I have read, that they were pressured by the British government and others to do so, because the British government now, through its Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has stated in no uncertain terms that it is not in support of Baroness Scotland being the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Don't forget that as we speak, the chairman of the Commonwealth is Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and he's chairman because, like most international organizations, it goes from one country to the next, and it so happens that he's now the sitting chairman. I believe that two things. One, he will be very uncomfortable with Baroness Scotland being the Secretary General and him being chairman, because as you know, the antecedents of Baroness Scotland, she was a member of Tony Blair's cabinet. She was
And
appointed by Gordon Brown to be Attorney General.
Attorney
She
General,
has
yes, yes, yes,
she has stated um, positions which runs contrary to that of the
mm,
Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. It will be a very uncomfortable relationship. Also,
yes,
there are countries that has accused her of being engaged in acts of corruption. She has denied them, vehemently denied them. There are also other countries that have accused her of not being a stable force in terms of the administration of the British Commonwealth, and would like to see the back of her
yes,
this time around. And those countries have been trying to find an alternate candidate to Baroness Scotland. And I believe that the British have gotten to the ears of our Prime Minister here in Jamaica, made
yes.
serious suggestions. I don't know what they have promised, if they have promised anything, but
Yeah.
our government has changed its position.
Well, Delano, I just want to say to you that you're frozen, but we can hear you clearly. Your image is frozen, but we can hear you clearly. Uh, it would be unfortunate if they are taking the Boris Johnson's air, because Boris Johnson is maybe on his way out soon. At the
Well,
same
Boris,
time, based on the Partygate factor, one would say like he's a dead man walking, even though I'm affiliated with the Conservative Party, but I think the writing is on the wall now that more than likely
you
it's not a
don't
matter,
believe
matter of when.
you don't you
Yes.
don't you don't believe that his colleagues are any longer persuaded by his umpteen number of apologies.
Well, I think in the UK one of the things is that, and you'll always hear this, if a minister is overcome with a fault and the press keep coming at him, and no matter how much they apologize, as long
Yes,
as the press keep coming at him, Delano, there's going to be a point where the prime minister keeps saying, I have confidence in my minister, I've got confidence in my minister, and then the next day you're going to hear he had to resign or he step aside to spend time with his family because
sure.
somehow you are caught away, and you bring the party into disrepute, you bring the government into disrepute, and that is what is happening now. I'm on record saying this, and many conservatives saying that as well, that too much of this is overflowing and overlooking the government at present, and based on how it is looking, it is going to be a matter of time when the prime minister go, and of course I'll be one of those persons who vote for the next one as well, as I voted for him as the leader of the party. But that is a signal. He could survive, but that's a signal really at this present moment. So the prime minister of Jamaica should be very cautious about
Well,
taking the years there.
well, we will see. We will see how that pans out.
Yeah. Delano, I don't know what is happening, but we can hear you clearly. It's no problem. But you just that you're frozen. People are picking that up.
I
What's your
really
last
don't
word?
know.
Yeah, what's your last word on the Commonwealth bit there? The point I mentioned, is it a wise move for Jamaica still to be pushing that, if that is if they're saying we are moving on? Take the moving on, Delano. Take the moving on from myself to say that it means moving away from the Queen and to be a republic. Just, is it a wise move then to be pushing to be the Commonwealth Secretariat?
Well, I believe that if the position of Secretary General of the Commonwealth is is a very effective position. And if Jamaica is able to occupy it on behalf of CARICOM, then I believe that we should go for it. I
Mm.
do not believe that there's any contradiction in being a member of the Commonwealth and at the very same time moving towards having a Republican status. There are many countries that are republics that are members of the Commonwealth. I really don't see a contradiction.
Yeah. Then I'm gonna ask you to do me one thing. I want to finish off with you properly with the book. I'm gonna ask you to just go out and come back in. That is what happens sometime. If you do that, yeah, just I
I
remove you,
do,
you come back in, and I just continue a bit. I wait for you to come back in, okay? So we can talk
yeah,
about
do
the book.
sure.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. I'm just getting Delano to come back to finish properly. It's been a very interesting discussion, interesting uh, information which is coming, and it opens the appetite for other things. And here I can see him coming back in, and as normal is best thing. So I was waiting for his image to come up there. Um, and this is one of his books here, the Jamaica Diaspora, uh, building an operational framework. Dylan, I
Am
can't
I
see the
back?
image. Yeah, but no picture this time.
I really don't know what is happening from this side. We are doing everything.
You're doing
Uh,
everything.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
what I can do, okay. I was gonna say I can put on his picture. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's Delano there. That's his picture. If he comes back in, I'll just say to him, his picture is there, um, and we can do it from there. Yeah. Delano, I've got a brilliant idea. It doesn't make a difference. I
Yeah.
have your I have your picture up so people can see your picture where you're reading the book, The Jamaica Diaspora.
Yes.
Tell us about the
That's
book.
that's a picture that was taken in my office, yes, the law office. That
Yeah.
book came about as a result of my experience with the diaspora conferences. One of
Yes.
the things, one of my beef over the years is that we have always had very fine initiatives. We have implemented a number of decisions in different spheres and different areas, but we have not left any record for other persons to follow. And
Yes.
therefore, when people come on board 20 years, 30 years down the road with an idea, they put forward the idea as if it is a new idea, a fresh idea. But if one were to just do a little research and read, they will realize that it is not a new idea. The book focuses on Jamaican diaspora community. It focuses on Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica. And it
Mm.
focuses on how they interact with Jamaicans who are living here in Jamaica at all levels. And it treats with a number of the issues, some of which you raised. It deals with the matter having to do with the right of Jamaicans are to vote or not to vote in our elections. It deals with the issue of investments in Jamaica. It deals with the constant stream of assistance coming from Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica to the social fabric of Jamaica. It deals with some of the issues we are faced with here on a day-to-day basis, such as violence upfront, such as the lack of training and education for many of our young people. The brain drain is an issue which we also deal with head on in the book. And it outlines what are some of the policies which we have put in place in order to be able to get Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica
Yes.
more involved in Jamaican affairs. For example, the issue of the establishment of a Jamaica Diaspora Day, which is June 16th every year.
Yes.
That day ought to be commemorated as the Jamaican Diaspora Day in recognition of Jamaicans who are living outside of Jamaica. It also
And
deals with the board, which was
yes.
established in order to be able to advise the minister having
Yes.
responsibility for diaspora affairs. No longer should it be a minister in Jamaica who just get up and make decisions on behalf of Jamaicans who are living outside. They must have an input and
Yes.
consultation take place. And numerous other proposals exist.
And Delano, somebody just asked, where is the book available? Is it via Amazon?
The book is not yet up on Amazon. We're going to do that. It is
Yes.
hard copied throughout bookstores here in Jamaica, but we're looking at the feasibility of getting it up in soft copy. My bad.
Yeah. I, I,
My
I
fault.
I have your email address there, Delano Franklyn at gmail.com, that people
Right.
can is that the best contact if anyone can want to.
Oh yes. Oh yes. They can be in
Yes.
contact with me by that, or call me if they so desire. My numbers are public.
Yes, and Delana, the point that you mentioned before we go is really right, where you said it's important for it to be documented, and it's important for it to be recorded, because during the diaspora period and times, new people may come into it now, and they go to a conference and they hear the same discussions about overseas voting, and they say, "Wow, this is new." If they
Yes.
only knew that we have been talking about this from 2004,
Absolutely.
and
There are so many persons.
yes,
So there are so many people who have called me as a result of that book,
yes,
because they would put forward an idea, and I'm talking about at all levels,
yes,
both here in Jamaica and outside of Jamaica. They would
yes,
put forward an idea. One of them, for example, is a Jamaica Diaspora Bond. That is
yes.
not something that is new. That is something which we have put forward as a proposal. We have discussed it. We have fleshed it out. Um,
Yes,
we have run into roadblocks with it, have
yes,
challenges with it. It's not new. And
yes,
therefore, when the book is sent to them and they realize that it's not something new, they say, oh, so this
yes,
has a history. Yes, it does. And to record what we have done over the years is absolutely important. There are also other countries with diasporas, and they would call to say, what can we do to increase relationship with our people who are living outside? We understand that Jamaica has been doing this or they have been doing that, and I would provide them with a copy of the book. So it has had reviews many places.
it is so important for the recording, and because I was speaking to Matunda McCullough, Matunda McCullough,
Yes,
um, and we're talking about the book by Donovan Stanbury, How Trade Liberalization Affects and Sugar Dependent Community in Jamaica, Global Action,
right,
Local Impact, which is going to be launched at the High Commission on Tuesday, the 26th. And
yes,
we're talking about how we need to actually understand, we need to write our is well, actually what we're doing, we're writing our history, isn't it, Delano? That's what we're doing.
yes. In fact, that is what we're doing, and I took the time
Yeah.
in between doing everything else to ensure that it is documented up to a point. It needs to be updated um,
Yes.
from the standpoint of activities which have taken place over the last few
Mm.
years, but it allows for persons who are participating in
Yes.
affairs having to do with the Jamaican diaspora to have
Yes.
an understanding of the history of our development, as well as the issues which we have
Yes.
to grapple with, and some of the matters which we should be able to follow up in order to at the end of the day get
Yes.
Jamaicans far more integrated in their motherland as we seek to develop this very beautiful country of ours.
Fantastic. Well, Delano, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. That was Attorney at Law, former Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign of Trade from 2002 to 2007. Delano Franklyn, who has just spent some time with me today, going through some key points. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the book, as you can see right here. The book is in my hands. You can contact Delano, which is email delanofranklin@gmail.com. If any issues, just contact me, because I got the link straight with Delano. Is that okay, Delano? I get
That's
20% or
fine.
30%? Which is it?
No, no,
20?
no, that's fine. That's fine. That's not a problem.
So
It's not a
listen,
problem.
listen. Thank you so much for tonight, Delano. Don't worry. Even though we lost your image there, I had the image up on the screen. You can watch it later. You can see that I did a good job there
Thanks
improvising.
very much, my brother. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure being here.
Yes, thank you, sir.
All the best.
Have a good evening.
Sure.
Thank you. Bye
You
bye,
too.
Delano.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining those on Instagram, Jamaica Valley, Sanio Frank. Um, Thank you so much for joining tonight. It was a very interesting discussion. What we talked about was the whole aspect of Jamaica CARICOM Commonwealth Secretary General. We spoke about should Jamaica rid itself of the British monarchy, and we touched a lot actually for the first half an hour of the show on diaspora affairs and about overseas voting. It's a topic which need to be expanded more, but my view and what people are actually saying that they need to come to a fundamental resolution. I don't want to lose and to omit some of the views that persons were putting on, and I'll just say put them out here. Uh, Scotty, you were saying the first person who needs to go is the Governor General. He's the main culprit. Um, I go further. JLP want to replace the Queen, but the parties don't agree on the type of presidency that we must have. Go further. To move forward, both parties will need to be disbanded. That is what someone said. PNP need to put down a marker and say what type of presidency it wants. This will force the JLP to take a position. Go further. The lady says she has no deadline. This is nonsense. That was Malahu Fort who mentioned that when I raised her as the person it is deemed to be responsible for this change, if anything, which has been said, but there's no marker. The PNP was, someone said the PNP was the, what is it? The PM was merely trying to cut down Chuck. Okay, that's something else there. The Jamaica government is a lapdog doing Boris Johnson bidding. This is regarding the Baroness Scotland being upstage and the switch from the CARICOM close knit with Jamaica supporting, and then that change of heart. Believe it that it was Boris Johnson somehow supporting Jamaica, pushing Miss Johnson. Jamaica government has no mind of its own, being influenced by Lion Boris. Is the book available via Amazon? We said no, it's not available by Amazon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. Remember to like and subscribe to the SYLBOURNE Show and watch the replay. Please share this and come back to you next time. Thursday night, see you at the In Review, and Saturday night, Talk and Sip. And remember, as I said last night, support this book. This is another book I wanted you to support, which is How Trade Liberalization Affects a Sugar-Dependent Community in Jamaica. Okay? And that is the book by Mr. Donovan Stanberry. There's a launch at the High Commission April the 26th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Guest speaker is Excellency Mr. Seth Ramakun, the High Commissioner, Professor Yakub Malugeta, Professor of Energy and Development of Policy at the University College of London, and Donovan Stanberry, PhD, CD, former Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Jamaica, Campus Register. I hope to interview him, just like how I did Mr. Delano Franklyn, to share on the sugar industry as well. Remember, finally, you can also get the book by Delano Franklyn, which I highlighted here. There it is, the Jamaica Diaspora, and I also have the book as well. Yep, I can sit back and read it, put that same picture. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night. And Lorna Savage, thank you so much for coming. Interesting topic. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.